headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.
Here's the headline. Was the spring statement racist? Now, I only ask that because campaigners have said that Rishi Sunak's spring budget had a racist element because past budgets have been proven to be have a disproportionate effect on African and Caribbean communities. And all the indications were that the recent spring statement would have similar outcomes. I wanted to ask, why is that so? How can that be? And lots of other questions as well about the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge in the West Indies, pupil Q, all of those things. So who I've got on the line is Clive Lewis, who's Labour MP for Norwich South, which is in fact the area I lived in for many, many, many years. And Clive Lewis joins me now. Clive, thank you so much for your time. We've got a lot to get through. So for people who say, what the hell are you talking about? How can Rishi Sunak's spin budget have any racist or racial element? What would you say?
Yeah, well, I mean, that wasn't my headline. That was the headline of the Voice newspaper.
Right. Okay. So let's take that away.
But I would say that, look, this was anti-worker. It was a budget which is going to disproportionately impact on the poor. Well, they're going to get less help than, according to the resolution budget, wealthiest half. And the bottom line is the vast majority of black and ethnic minority people are working class. Overwhelmingly represent that, disproportionately represented as part of the working class. So they're overwhelmingly and disproportionately going to be affected by that budget. I think that's what the Voice newspaper was getting at.
Right.
And on top of that, the Treasury has refused to do an impact assessment on its effects on various different protected groups with protected characteristics, so women, disabled people, and so on and so forth. So I think that's probably where the newspaper were coming from with that angle.
That's why I like looking behind the headlines, because I mean the headline's one thing, the actual story's one thing. So, and I would agree with you, and I'm sure lots of our listeners would agree to you with you, and especially as I won't go into Rishi Sunak and his wife and money and things like that at the moment. Also making headlines.
This is the class that, I mean, this is one of the things that we don't talk about enough in politics is class. I was interested in your comment about Russian oligarchs. One of the questions I've been asking the government is, why are we just stopping at Russian oligarchs? You know, oligarchs haven't just undermined democracy in Russia, haven't just robbed the Russian people. They're robbing us here in this country. They're affecting our democracy. They're undermining our media. They own our media. And it's in their interest that much of the media operates. I don't know who owns Talk Radio, but I wonder whether it's an oligarch or someone associated with a kind of corporate oligarchy. But nonetheless, I think, you know, if we're going to have a look at this budget, Rishi Sunak is married to a billionaire. He's a billionaire himself, or a multimillionaire. Yeah. He represents the interests of his class, irrelevant of what colour he is. But the vast majority of black and ethnic minority people are working class, and they've been stuffed by this spring statement.
Okay. Let's talk about the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. I mean, your heritage, I believe, is from Grenada. They've had independence for some while. There seems to be, and it depends what newspaper you read, I'm guessing, but at least the Duke of Cambridge, Prince William, has actually reiterated what his father has said, talking about the abhorrence of slavery. And he's also said that he accepts, or he still, what was the actual thing he said? He pointed out Bahamas will be celebrating 15 years of independence, Jamaica 60 years, 40 years for Belize last year. And he said that he and the monarchy support with pride and respect decisions about those islands' future. Relationships evolve, friendships endure. What do you say? Because even one right-wing commentator in the Mail has called it, as some of the images from their trip, a little bit icky. What's your take on that?
I think it was probably badly mistimed. I think what you're seeing is the age of deference is well and truly over when it comes to many of these countries. They've had to watch. They've obviously been impacted by the Black Lives Matter protests. They've looked at our own government that has tried to prosecute and defended the Colston statue. They would have probably been on the side. They were probably thinking, well, hold on a second. The reason we're stuck on this island or on this island, and the reason that we're one of the poorest countries in the world is because of slavery and empire. And they're looking at a statue which is basically a tribute to someone that enslaved their ancestors, and a government that defends that. They'll be looking at the COVID vaccination program, which this government has fought against, the TRIPS waiver, which would have stopped big corporations, would have made corporations, the big pharmaceutical corporations share the technological know-how of how to make the vaccine cheaply, to make sure that African and West Indian countries and others around the world in the global south could have been vaccinated.
But sorry to jump in.
So many things.
But I was going to say, at least the royals, would you not say, at least Prince William has apologised? He stopped short of an apology. That's wrong. But he's recognised those issues. He's actually said it out loud.
I don't think that William and his wife are in any way bad people, but they are part of an institution which is part of a British establishment, which if you think about where I work in Parliament, Parliament doesn't have sovereignty. It's a myth. Sovereignty lies with the Crown, i.e. namely the Prime Minister. But there's an establishment here. It's an opaque, undemocratic set up, and it makes many of the decisions which in fact impact people globally.
The royals,
if you think about so if you think about that, then you can understand why, as the head of state, of which they are, and the head of their state, these people are saying, well, actually, we want to forge our own way, future and our own way forwards.
But what about the comment where people are saying, all right, then you won't get any aid? I'm just if you want to go on your own way, you won't get any aid.
That's not true, because obviously the UK has an aid budget which isn't restricted to just Commonwealth countries. But I think that what you're seeing here is that after independence there was a halfway house, wasn't there, for many countries, and I think turning back to the Commonwealth was a big part of the Brexit narrative for Boris Johnson and those supporting the position that he took, and it does feel that some of that is coming apart. The world has moved on. And, I think I kind of hear that there is a tin ear in the Foreign Office about this, about the fact that the world has moved on, about the fact that, Empire 2.0 that was coined by some in the Foreign Office isn't actually going to be kicking off anytime soon. And I think maybe it's a rude awakening for some, but, ultimately, these people have a self-awareness of where they sit in the world, what they want, and they want to be independent. That's happened in Barbados, which was always the jewel in the crown of the West Indies. It was always even if it's Australia, if it had its way, I mean, they're always talking about becoming a republic, and I've got to say, it must be difficult for Prince William and Catherine, because they're young, they know that sentiment, they've gone through that, but they're still part of the firm and have still got to turn up, and they must be. But it's the look. We're the sixth richest country in the world, and many of these countries are still extremely poor, and that's partly because of a financial and economic system that we have championed these last 50 years, which has left many of them in a far worse position than they were in the 1960s and 70s when they first became independent. That's part of the economic system, which is an extremely extractive economic system for much of the global south, and that's only got worse since COVID. Many of these countries have been left behind. And I think what they're doing is it's just a reassessment of where their priorities are, and if you want, where their loyalties lay. And they're saying, even though much of this is symbolic, symbols are important. And we want to kind of say to you that we wish you the best, but we also wish to go our own separate way. Yeah. I think there'll be a lot of people in this country that look at that. Many people in this country, myself included, are Republicans. I have no ill will towards the Queen or any member of the royal family.
Well, that's another thing that we should say, because people say, oh, but they were greeted by as rock stars, as you would. They've got nothing against Catherine and William. They just want to be a country that's not bowing down. They want
to be citizens of their own country, not subjects. Yes, I think that's a fair. I think that's fair.
That's it.
And you don't have to have any ill will towards the royal family to want to be a citizen as opposed to a subject. It's something from the past, and deference to your so-called betters as part of that kind of class system. I mean, why we accept that in this country, I don't know. And I think an increasing number of people don't. But I'm sure some of your listeners will be screaming at the radio at me.
Oh, but, I'm sure
we live in a democracy. We're entitled to our opinion.
We are indeed.
Good talk.
Hot talk. Bold talk. Talk radio.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Watch it live on your smart TV.
The world headquarters of common sense.
Talk Radio.